Kia ora. Good morning. I'm just getting myself situated. Hang on, sorry. Oh. Right, so I'm sitting here having my breakfast, and my YouTube brought up this channel of, it's called Uncanny or something, and it's a guy who does a channel and a podcast where he does paranormal investigations, and it was called The Little Biter. And I started listening to it, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. More so for the fact that he brought in two doctors, and one of them being Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, who used to be on The Most Haunted as the parapsychologist. And the fact that he was going along with some of this was extremely disappointing, because it shows how little progress we are making in the terms of cyclical research, parapsychology, where the scientists my teacher worked with and the knowledge she passed on to me goes back centuries, and we've been making real headway in things like, experimenting with the God phone. And obviously when they were working on the God phone in the 70s and 80s, we ended up with spirit boxes and white noise and EVPs and all of that as a result, which completely got used and abused and misunderstood and can be very easily manipulated. And it's one of the reasons why when I took over the experiment of the God phone, I completely removed technology from the process, because when it comes to anything that involves batteries or electricity or the radio waves and that, it's too easily manipulatable. Even with our own minds, we can manifest things through the radio waves without even knowing it, that we will mistake for spirit voices. It's unreliable research, but it's the scientists that my teacher was working with that started that whole process off, and it was a huge advancement in parapsychological research. Because finally we were getting somewhere. It was a massive breakthrough, but Nikola Tesla tried to work on it as well, because they don't understand how any of this works in terms of, from the other perspective, as in the voices of the dead. And I, I would go so far as to say is that some of that evidence was manipulated back then, which is why I don't touch physical machinery when it comes to talking to the dead, quote unquote, because I understand how it works. Hang on, sorry, because I've just eaten. When you're a high priestess, when you're an indigenous shaman or indigenous medicine woman, when your whole existence is based around understanding and communicating with and living alongside your ancestors that are no longer living, you have a different perspective of death. You have access to the afterlife that people who are religious don't, that people who are skeptical don't. And most scientists are skeptical. Most scientists will believe when they have the evidence, which was me trying to find God. I'll believe God exists when I find the evidence. Well, I found the evidence. I just had to change my point of view. I had to change my mind on who I thought God was, because, again, societal constructs on who we are told our gods are is very different to the reality of what God is. And it's all because people underestimate, people overestimate, people misjudge, people lie, people get it wrong. And then they pass all of that on to the rest of us, and then for centuries we're all raised to believe the completely wrong things. because you have the good elements and you have the bad elements. Like, there's so much emphasis on Satan being bad and demons and demonology and possessions and devil worship and cults and black magic and that it overshadows the opposite, which is the elementals and finding your faith and having ascensions and healing your body and forgiving your soul and clearing trauma and rising and ascending above everything you thought you were ever going to be, because that's the difference between the paranormal and the supernatural. So I looked into it. I looked into this case, and I just thought, I can't believe that this case is a prime example of everything that is wrong with paranormal investigators and researchers, and the two people that he had on have got degrees. They are actually called doctors. And one of them's a skeptic and one of them is a believer, and they both got it wrong. Embarrassingly wrong. Now, the reason why I speak up and I let people know the truth of what they're dealing with is because when you see the truth, when you understand it for what it is, the activity stops. And it's only if you want the activity to stop will it stop. But you'd be surprised at how many people don't want the activity to stop because it gets them views and likes and tourists and investigators coming to walk around their house. It gives them attention, it makes them money. But when you're dealing with the paranormal, you are dealing with an imbalance of the psychological mind. The paranormal is created in your head. The paranormal is all in your head. You manifest the paranormal, you create it. And so you're basically sitting in your own filth while you're allowing it to go on. And the longer you ignore it, the worse it gets. So I'm going to give you a brief rundown about this case. 1999, this family in Ramsgate, the dad's always away at sea. There's the mum and the three kids, two girls and a son, I think. And one of the daughters gets up in the morning and says to her mum, have I got bite marks on my face? And the mum was joking. She was like, yeah. And the girl panicked and she goes, no, I'm only joking. You don't have bite marks on your face. Why are you asking? And the girl said, because I had a dream a little girl came into my room with a bucket and spade and bit my arms, my face, my legs, all up and down her body, bit her in her dream. And apparently this little girl kept coming in and she kept having these dreams where she was being bitten. And then, because the father was away and it was a big old empty house, the mother started taking in exchange students from other countries. And one of the girls from Venezuela, one of the visitors from Venezuela, experienced the same thing. She had a dream. I'm trying not to get pissed off. She had a dream. She went downstairs to go to the bathroom. The little girl was on the toilet. She shut the door. The girl opened the door and bit the girl's hand. And she came downstairs the next day. Oh my God, I had a dream about a little girl that bit me, right? So then the girl telling the story says she was walking down the hall one day. The father bought a piano. She saw the girl at the piano getting ready to play the piano, or played the piano, or I don't know, something like that. Something to do with she approached the piano, because by this point I was just so pissed off. I was just like, I can't believe what I'm hearing, in the way that they were going along with all of this. It feeds into the psychosis. They were feeding into the psychosis because what happens when people don't understand the difference between the paranormal and the supernatural is they feed into the psychosis, so it ramps up the activity. And this is exactly what happened. The more they started talking about their experiences, the more experiences they had, because it feeds into it. So then what else happened? So the interesting thing is, from what they were saying in the interview, from what they were relaying, the experiences were only happening with the women in the house, with the females. And I'll get to that in a second. But the father was always away. And the kids were getting ready to go to school. The back door was open. The mother said, "Who left the back door open?" They all turned around to look at the back door. The back door slammed and locked, and they heard someone running up the stairs. They're blaming the bite marks. Oh, God. They're blaming the bite marks. They're saying it's a poltergeist. But poltergeist just means noisy ghost. And ghost just means the same thing as spirit, like the veiling, the essence of, the remnants of something from the past, something that was living from the past, like the outline, the shadow, the silhouette of energy left in the past, is basically all that means. The thin veil of energy of something that once existed. Then they keep saying that certain things happen and from Remembrance Day into the run up to Christmas, and every year it's the same thing, and the little girl quietens down, and it's when the father's home, and they keep experiencing hearing this man coming up and down the stairs, doors slamming. They're saying, "Oh, he's quite violent," and they can smell pipe smoke. And he's quite violent, even though he's never actually done anything violent other than shut doors. Because this is what happens when you have hysteria. The mind overthinks, and they step out of the subconscious mind where logic, reason, doubt, compromise, common sense live, and they completely overrun their mind on what it could be and come up with a whole series of alternatives as to what it could be, and none of it is based on fact, none of it's based on logic or reason. They don't give anything the benefit of the doubt, they just assume. And assumptions, when you're assuming things, making assumptions about things that are incorrect, is borderline paranoia. Because when you don't know what it is and you go over it and over it and over it in your head, it causes anxiety, and it's borderline paranoia when you make assumptions about things that aren't based on fact or logic or reason. That's when you're dealing with paranoia. And that's why I always say to people when I'm working with clients and people who come to me for advice, when they start overthinking these things, you need to take a step back and say, am I being paranoid, or like, where is the logic in this? And I get them to deconstruct all their thoughts and go backwards and remove all the assumptions where there is no fact. Only deal with facts, only deal with tangible proof and evidence. And if you can't come up with that, then you've made it up in your head, and you've basically picked up the ball and ran with it, where there is no end to the field in sight. So you just keep running until you exhaust yourself, and then that feeds into the psychosis, and then you create more paranormal activity. So around Christmas time, when the dad's home, they hear this noise. The girl stops because they're saying, "Oh, she's scared of the man." Because when they hear the man, chances are the man they're hearing, it's a time slip, a time bend, what you would call a classic haunting. But he won't even know they're there. And it sounds like, because of the time of year, this is somebody who was maybe away at sea, and he's come home for Christmas, and they're picking up on that. That's supernatural. That's not paranormal. They've stepped into a time bend where time has bent, where stone tape theory, right? And because you're talking about Ramsgate, so you're talking about a house that is on the ocean, and water is a conduit, and it will transmute and transmit frequencies and energies better than any satellite will, because it's natural and organic. And when you live by the water, it is very, very common to experience quote unquote paranormal or supernatural activity, because the water will pick up on everything that happens around it, sound wise, and then play it back, energy wise, and then feed it back, because water holds everything in the molecules of the atoms. And atoms are very resonant based. They absorb energy and they push energy out with the force of, well, atomic light. So I think the man that they're hearing, that's a supernatural event, because you're talking about physics. You're talking about where time has merged, but where one will be completely unaware of the other. He will be going about his business, completely unaware that people in the future can hear him going about his business. That's supernatural. That's an incredible privilege to be a witness of, because you're witnessing the laws of physics being defied right in front of your eyes. And that's something to pay attention to, because it's awesome. But the thing is, the second you start trying to concentrate on what it is you're experiencing, it automatically cuts off the connection, because then you're thrown out of the loop, which is why it only happens for like a few seconds at a time, because the second you start to register there's something unnatural going on, something supernatural, something extra natural going on in the annals of time that has been played back, when the frequency hits right, when you start realizing there's something unnatural going on, that's when your subconscious mind kicks in and starts trying to figure out what it is it's hearing, and that action alone pulls you out of the loop. But it's done on purpose, because it protects you from accessing frequencies that you couldn't physically withstand, because you're in two completely different eras in time, and our physical body cannot be in different points in time for too long without it physically affecting us. I know, because I'm a time jumper. And when I first started playing around with quantum magnetics and going to the National Trust places and that, I would sleep for like 2 weeks. I would be so physically sore, because we're bound by gravity, and we have physical bodies, whereas they don't. They're a pure frequency, they're energy. And it would be like walking into, it's the equivalent of like holding on to electric cables, the electricity cables that run across our house and all that. It would be like holding on to one of those, painful. And if it's extreme, it could do you quite a lot of physical damage. So you have to be careful how you play this when it comes to the supernatural, just as much as you have to do with the paranormal. So with him, there was no proof that he was violent, dark, or threatening. I think that they completely became hysterical with it, because they don't understand what's going on. They make out like, oh, we just live alongside them, we've been here over 30 years, we're used to it, blah, blah, blah. But they're feeding into a cycle of psychosis that is unhealthy. And going back to, they were working in the garden, they dug up a dead dog, and the father threw the dog in the bin. Then they started hearing the dog running around the house and licking his face and blah, blah, blah. What an absolute disgusting, disrespectful way to honour someone's pet. And this is what I keep saying about how it's so important that we have respect for the dead, even if it's a pet. Because the way that we treat the dead, with the graves, with the cemeteries, with the dirt around them, with how we send them off, with how we remember them, it seems like it's only Māori people that know how to do it properly. Because that dog was a member of somebody's family who was lovingly buried in a garden that roses were planted on, and he just threw the dog's body in the bin like it was nothing. Imagine if that was his mother or, one of his kids and somebody did that just because it's a pet. Or my mum doesn't like pets, she said. So what, you're just going to throw it in the bin like it was nothing to the people who mourned its loss? People cried over the loss of that dog. There would have been people in that house that mourned that dog's loss for years. My familiar Ghibli has been gone since, was it 2020? Since December 2020, and I still cry for him. I've got his ashes right by my bed, and I still mourn his loss. I still weep for my Ghibli. And so they triggered the dog because, like I keep saying, the worst thing for the dead is to be forgotten. The biggest fear for any conscious being is to be forgotten in death, because the longer you go without being remembered, the weaker your frequency becomes in the atoms of time. And so it's really, really important that we honour and remember our dead, even if we didn't know them. When I go to cemeteries and graveyards and all of that, I go along and make a point of acknowledging every single headstone and pay my respects, because it makes them present, it keeps their memory alive. And it draws them into the present, into the now, so they're not forgotten. I'm going to have a sip. So the girl spirit dies down whenever the dad's home for Christmas and stuff. And that's what you need to pay attention to. So then what happens is the father's in the kitchen reading the newspaper, they're putting up the Christmas decorations, the father yelps, the mum's teacup smashes, hits him on the head and cuts his head. Cuts the father's head. Poltergeist activity, blah, blah, blah. And this is why I'm disappointed with Kieran O'Keefe, because he should know that poltergeist activity is predominantly more centred around pubescent and prepubescent children. And there were 3 children in that house. Given the fact that the father was always away and the mother was having to deal with everything herself, I'm telling you now that the activity that was centred around the women is directed towards a resentment of the father. I'm telling you now. The first thing you have to look at with poltergeist activity, like their stuff, is the mental health and the emotional stability of the people in the house. With the father always being away at sea, and the mother having to deal with 3 kids and then bringing in boarders and, from other countries and stuff, she was put into a very highly stressful situation. If she was having no contact with him and she needed his advice or support, if she had money troubles, probably one of the reasons why she took in exchange students to help make a little bit of extra money. I think that there's a lot going on behind the scenes with the mother and the girls, especially because it seems to be around the girls and not the boy. While the boy witnesses it, there seems to be no sort of evidence that he experienced anything himself. So when you're looking at females, you have to look at the menstrual cycle as well, because women are the intuitives. Women are the rulers of the emotional and the intuitive. Men are the rulers of the physical and the mental, the mind and the body, whereas the women, it's the heart and the soul. And one of them got pregnant at 18. She went on to get a job helping mothers from troubled backgrounds and that prepare for, to become parents, having babies. Some of them came from abusive backgrounds, from, addictions and that, and she works to help prepare these mothers for life in the world with a child and all that. So she's bringing stuff into the house as well. And then, of course, you get this woman, Elizabeth from Venezuela, who, you're talking about South America, where she will be more connected to the supernatural and the occult and that more than anyone from Britain. And she's picked up, like, she's absorbed the hysteria. The girl was only in the dreams, other than what she saw at the piano. But I think that was a case of like mass hysteria. Because she's aware that there's a girl wandering the house, she's manifested the girl in the house. Now, the reason why the girl is biting will be for one of two reasons, and only one of two reasons, because the dead do not wander the earth and they cannot physically touch you. The dead prefer to contact you in your dreams and through signs and synchronicities more than they will physical manifestation, because as I've said before, physical manifestations require having to tear open the fabric of time and step through it, which uses an inordinate amount of energy to do it, which means that you would end up with TVs going off, light bulbs exploding, that sort of thing, and you feel it before you see it, because you'll hear the clicking of the static electricity in the atmosphere, and your hair will stand on end, and you'll hear like the in the atmosphere, and that's how you know that they're charging up to manipulate the ion particles in the Earth's atmosphere and your biorhythmic parameter in order to be able to step through the tear in the fabric of time to come to you. But when the dead do it, they know that they only have a short time to do it. So whatever it is that they're needing to tell you, they will be very clear and very concise. They will get the message out, and then they will be gone, and you'll be left shocked and stunned. And your hair will stand on end, and you'll have like a surge of energy, and your body will have to react some way. So you'll either like be excited or you'll run screaming or whatever, because then your instincts kick in, which is your fight or flight or freeze. So there was no evidence in any of that the dead came through to them. It was all in dreams. Our loved ones communicate in our dreams, and I don't think that was any of that was happening. You have to look at the little girl as being one of two things. Remember, I said negative energy when you're talking about possessions, and when someone's targeting you with a psychic attack. They will often use children and like young women, animals, babies crying, females in distress calling for help in order to lure you into their energetic trap. But that doesn't seem to be the case with this, because there's nothing in there that suggests that it's anything more than a wife frustrated that her husband's always away and she's having to deal with everything herself, and possibly having money issues and having a resentment towards the father that the girls are now picking up on. And the little girl biting them is what I think personally is the second option, which is she was waking them up because they were having docking issues. You know how you have sleep paralysis. I've discussed this many times, over and over and over. You know, you'll wake up, you'll think you're awake, you can't move, and then something scary will jump on your bed or show themselves as something scary to wake you up with a fright and a shock, because your heart's on the brink of stopping, because you're at risk of dying from sudden adult's death syndrome, SADS. Sudden adult's death syndrome is just the adult version of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And it's when we go to sleep, we go into a state of suspended animation, so that our souls can clock off and go and wander through time and space, through the space-time continuum. And when we are there, that's when we have access to everyone that we ever knew in any of our souls' reincarnation cycles. And we're there with them, and we never parted from our lost loved ones. We meet them in our sleep, or they turn up in songs and smells and signs and synchronicities, because that's the easiest way for the conscious universe to be able to connect with us through the neurons in our brain and the wormholes. And they send the signals down and we pick up on it, and then in that moment in time we're connected with the memory of our loved ones. That's how they do it. That's the physics of it. But to assume that they can rise up from the grave and then find you where you are and then slam doors and bite you and all that is utterly ridiculous. It's not logical. But physics is logical. Physics makes sense. Psychology makes sense. So you have to rewire your brain to understand what's going on, because it sounds like the little girl was biting them to wake them up, because they were having, as they were starting to wake up, because you only dream and you only have sleep paralysis just as you are starting to wake up, as your conscious mind or your soul is starting to dock back into your physical body, because it's recognizing that you're about to wake up and alarm bells go off. It slowly starts hovering over your body to make to come docking into your body. And every now and then, if you start physically, if your mind starts waking up before your body, or your body wakes up before your mind does, or your mind wakes up before your body does, because if your body wakes up before your mind does, that's sleepwalking. Before your conscience. If your body wakes up before your conscience slips into your body, that's sleepwalking. Because your conscience is what makes you aware of everything. And if you start to wake up before your conscience is back into your body can't live without a conscience. Your mind, body, spirit needs to be in perfect alignment in order to be consciously aware, in order to be alive. And regardless of what people might say, your conscience helps your heart beat. Because people without a conscience are heartless, and they end up dying and aging and looking horrendous, like Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and my ex, people that are heartless, who have no connection to their conscience. They start to descend physically, because when the mind goes, when you have no conscience, the mind goes. And when the mind goes, the body follows. And then you slowly have a soul death. You slowly start to die. And you look old, you look hackett, you look wrinkly, you put on weight, you start to sag, everything like that. So our conscience keeps us alive. Not just in the physical either, but in the annals of time. We, in the physical, are the thread that gets woven into the fabric of our timeline. But our timeline is made up completely of conscious memory, which is stored in the universe. And when our conscience or our soul is aware of the fact that the body is starting to wake up and they're not there yet, they will send warning bells. They ring the warning bells. And I think that's when the little girl was coming in and biting in the dream to wake them up, so that the shock would wake them up, because you only dream just before you wake up. If you have a dream, you will always wake up within seconds of having that dream. We'll dream for anywhere between 20 minutes and a few seconds, but to us it'll seem like a lifetime, because we're out in the conscious universe where time exists all at once, right? So like a 2-second dream will feel like it lasted an hour. But the longest we'll dream is about 20 minutes. The shortest we'll dream is a couple of seconds. But we will always wake up after a dream, because it's the conscious mind's way of slowly easing us into the transition of the soul docking back into the body. It's gentle. and it's painless and it's kind. But if there's a docking issue, like if she was laying on her back and she was about to choke, or she was laying on her side and she put pressure on her heart or something like that, the conscious mind, the soul, in flying back to the body would have sent a warning signal, and the little girl who may have lived in the house before or may not have, she could have been someone completely manifested by the soul itself, recognised the signs and came in and bit them to wake them up, because then that shock would have woken them up. And it's like jump starting the heart. It's like using paddles on the heart to jump start the heart to get the person to wake up again. It's because you're dealing with a child, it is likely that she could have been someone who lived in the house, because children are pure and innocent. They are, until they start committing like sins. They're pure and innocent and completely are able to see time like it's nothing, like invisible friends and seeing spirits and all of that. Kids can see time better than adults because kids are pure and innocent and they're non-judgmental. And they take things on face value and it doesn't faze them. So a little girl in that house could have been very aware of the fact that she had a invisible friend in that room that she had to go and wake up. And completely, it wouldn't have even fazed her, because that's what happens with kids. Kids don't judge. Or it was the girl's ancestors or the girl's own conscience who manifested itself in her dream, because they can manipulate our dreams, as a little girl in order to get her to wake up before the soul could recorrect itself upon entry into her physical body. Otherwise, she would have died from, well, SIDS is sudden infant death. It would have been, what is it when it's the in-between ages? Not an infant, but not an adult. And that's what that was. And I think that the poltergeist activity, like the door slamming in it, bolting and hearing the footsteps, disembodied footsteps, and that is the manifest of the mind. So if the mum was pissed off, who left the back door open? And they turned around, that's classic kinetic energy, moving objects. And with poltergeist and kinetic energy, they can mirror themselves as disembodied voices and footsteps. And I can't believe that Dr. Kieran O'Keefe didn't say any of that. Even I, as a skeptic, was a little bit like, oh, and the dog and the stone tape theory. Poltergeist energy, kinetic energy being thrown, sleepwalking, sleep talking, sleep paralysis. Your sleep paralysis demon is there to save your life. When you get woken up with a shock like that, they're there to save your life. And the dog was purely, why did you throw my body in the bin? Why did you do that? You don't disrespect the dead like that. And dogs especially are the totem of, between the veil, dogs are the totem of, dogs will see time like it's nothing. And they will, just like with cats and horses, they will spend 65% of their day living in alternate timelines where they merge the two together and it's nothing. And that man's gone and thrown that dog's body in the bin, and that dog saying, what the hell did you do? You couldn't let me rest. You couldn't let my memory rest. And now I'm going to make you remember who I was. The only way that would stop is if he did something to honour the memory of that dog. But because he threw the dog's body in the bin and the dog's body will now be in the dump, the only thing he can do is lay offerings where the dog was buried, in hopes that the dog would be able to rest in peace again. This is why you don't mess with anything dead and buried in the ground. It's such a disrespectful way to honour the memory of someone or something that was once loved, just because you don't believe that pets have feelings, or that, they're just animals, is such a, I won't even say Neanderthalic, because even Neanderthals had an awareness of the importance of dogs and wolves, and Neanderthals had a really lovely way of honouring their dead, and their pets and all of that. It's uncivilized and immoral to assume that a living sentient being can't have emotions or feel love. Just because you don't like pets, what kind of person doesn't like pets? And that's what I thought. That tells you everything you need to know there about the mother. I'm telling you now that mother was probably a good 80% of all the occurrences in that house, because of latent resentment towards the father always being away and having to deal with the kids, 3 kids, on her own. And then if they were having money problems, and bringing in exchange students to help pay for the bills and stuff like that, the mother, I think, was 80% responsible for creating everything that went on in that house. And then the children picked up on the rest because they were kids. And kids absorb everything like sponges. And then those 2 doctors came along, supposed doctors came along, and completely just fed into the delusion. And when you're feeding the wrong thing into the wrong people, you are creating a Frankenstein's monster. And then we'll never get rid of paranormal activity. We'll never heal the sad, fragile, broken minds in our society and alleviate Papatūānuku, the planet, of everything that she's been forced to absorb because of us. And that's why I've come along. And I'm the only one in the world that knows what I know and can do what I do, because I use logic and reason and doubt, and I investigate, and I investigate everything within an inch of its life, and I don't make anything public until I'm happy with my conclusion. And when I have gotten it wrong, like with Jack the Ripper, I go back and fix it. And the Ailenmore Lighthouse hauntings and all that, I go back and fix it. But that's because new information came to light that I wasn't aware of before. So with my The Mystery Inside History shows, and my radio show, where my talkback radio, where you'll be able to call in, that family can call into my show, and I would be able to spend the entire show explaining to them everything that they're doing and what they can do to stop it. And a lot of it doesn't even cost anything. A lot of it is just self-analysis, a form of self-psychoanalysis, and dealing with childhood trauma, dealing with latent resentment, that sort of thing. And then the rest of it is treating your body better, having a healthier diet. And then that's where my sprays and clays come in to do the rest. So most of the paranormal activity and poltergeist activity and hauntings can be cleared up just by understanding what it is you're dealing with. A ghost is a time bend. A haunting is a time slip. But with a haunting, they know you're there. They'll see you. You'll have interactions with each other where they'll turn to look at you, where they'll come rushing towards you, where they'll speak. Because to them, you're the ghost. And a ghost is a time bend, and that's when your path and their path cross, but they will be completely unaware that you're there. And that's physics. That's not paranormal. The paranormal is Rene Descartes. I think, therefore I am. If you believe it, you manifest it. The human mind, the mind is our most powerful tool, which is why they started bringing in all this dementia and bullshit with, toxic food and medications and that, because they don't want people thinking for themselves, making the mind susceptible to AI control and that, so that they can control the way you think and feel, and feed into the paranormal. That's why my ex and my students and everybody, one of the reasons why they were determined to shut me down, because they're the paranormal lot. They believe in ghosts and hauntings and curses, and I mean, curses are real, but it's not in the way that you think. They believe in the stuff that I was trying to teach them against. And the stuff that I was trying to teach them against doesn't make you money. While it's a new concept, when you're a trailblazer, when you are at the cutting edge of physics and a science, when you are the developer of a science that has never been done before, that doesn't make money right away, and it brings in ridicule and judgment and, you know, unfair assessments, because you're trying to introduce something to people that goes against the societal norms. People would rather believe that the dead wander the earth and rattle chains and come and chase you like demons and that, than to admit that they've got stuff going on in their life, or that they're picking up on things that happened in that house or that building, that need to be dealt with. And my biorhythmic field generator, my organic one, when I lay it down on the ground and turn the knobs and do what I have to do, will be able to tell you what you need to use in order to deal with any of it. But you have to have a pure vessel in order to do it, which means you have to be carrying no sins or karmic debt. Because it's like a combination lock, and each combination taps into the ion particles, the phases that you put codes into the phases and the ion particles in the Earth's atmosphere. And in order to have that kind of permission to be that kind of gatekeeper, you have to be pure. So I'll be the only one that's allowed to use it. But you can use the electronic version where you just plug it in, or flick the switch and it'll do it for you, where you're not having access to it. It gains the access for you, so you'd have no control over the frequency that comes out of it. You just hold it and point it or plug it in and it'll do it all for you. It'll sweep for you, so you have no control over it. So my students wanted to shut it down because they wanted to do things like do tarot cards, which I'm against with adults. I'm not a fan of adults doing tarot cards, because tarot cards, as I keep saying, were invented as a form of psychotherapy back in the day, invented by the Germans in the 16th century as a form of psychotherapy. And then the Italians picked it up and turned it into a parlour game, which then by the Victorian era people were doing readings with them. But for tarot readings as they are now, when you're talking about cartomancy and tarot cards, they're supposed to be training tools for children. By the time you step into puberty, because in my culture, you do not introduce children to the learnings of the occult until they hit 16, if you're a girl, puberty. You have to be having a menstrual cycle. So cards, tarot cards, reading cards, they're really supposed to be for teenagers to use, for kids and teenagers to use, sort of because it helps them monitor their emotions. It helps them gauge their feelings and thoughts, and puts everything into alignment in order to be able to better understand their intuition. But I said to my students, don't do it, but they didn't listen. So I was just like, okay, just let them do it then and see what happens. And then because one of them was insisting on doing readings while she was smoking marijuana, she was smoking weed wax, like wax, candle wax that was infused with marijuana, and smoking marijuana. Because I smoked weed for pain and I know what I'm doing, she thought she could do it having not even done any of the training. And so I just thought, well, let her do it. Ria's going to make up her mind to do whatever she wants, and it's going to come back on her. Because then what happened was, her and Nikki started seeing spirits in their house. Nikki started reporting a little boy in her bedroom. Ria started seeing kids in her room. She was reporting she saw aliens in her backyard, she said, and they followed her. So, because they were putting things into their body, they didn't listen. And so they started descending into dissension psychosis. And then that's when the paranoia set in. Debbie's doing this, Debbie's doing that, Debbie's bad, blah, 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 let's cause trouble, blah, 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 because they didn't listen. And so what happened was, instead of them being saved and going through an ascension process where they would come around America with me to make those shows that I was training them up for on my podcasts, my live podcasts, they went against their teacher, and then all hell started breaking loose in their life. And now they're probably going to be going to prison. In the very least, they're going to lose everything in the lawsuit because they didn't listen, and then protected the pedophile and child groomer who was sleeping with my husband and my best friend. Well, the groomer wasn't, the pedophile was. The pedophile who was sexually attracted to my youngest when he was 7. They all guarded that relationship, and so did my boy's dad. He let it all happen. He knew it was happening and did nothing because he was being treacherous with the pedophile too. Rocio? So they had every reason to shut me down because I was going against everything that they wanted for their reputations and careers. They wanted to be big shots in the paranormal industry and the tarot reading industry. But I was trying to teach them the pitfalls and downfalls of what happens when you mess with things you don't understand, and they didn't listen. And now look. And now they're going to go down in history as being a group of occultists who protected and defended pedophiles connected to the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing. Not to mention the fact that people have died as a result of COVID, as a result of Donald Trump, the war in Iran, the war in Iraq. Sorry, the war in Iran, the war in Russia and Ukraine and that, because I couldn't get to America to do what I had to do in the time that I was meant to do it in order to alert everyone. I would have figured out soon enough that Donald Trump was the Lucifer that they all worshipped in this cult of the axis of evil. And it sounds ridiculous, but I've done the research and the evidence speaks for itself. None of this is made up. I have evidence to back everything that I claim because I'm a scientist. And I knew when I was starting to pull apart what people's understanding of the paranormal was, that it was going to come back on me. I knew I was going to take the hit with my reputation. I just didn't figure that it was going to be coming from my husband, the father of my children, family members, my students, clients, that sort of thing. I thought it would be like the wider world, and it wasn't. It was people in my own front yard. But I took the hit. I took every jab, every stab, every punch, every kick. Every time they knocked me down, I got back up because I stand in my truth. And as a scientist, I want quantum magnetics and the ascension sciences and biorhythmic engineering recognised as credible sciences in quantum entanglement and quantum magnetics and quantum theory and time theory and evolutionary theorism, and that I want my work recognised. And so I'm not going to put anything out there or put my name to anything that doesn't hold up along with my reputation. And they knew that. That's why they set out to destroy my reputation. She's a whore. She's a bad mum. she's crazy, she's lazy, and none of it was real. No evidence, all fabricated, all made up. So, and they hated the fact that I was working on myself, and in doing so, because they knew me when I was morbidly obese. I just started losing weight. Martin knew me when I was morbidly obese, but my students met me when I was just starting to lose weight. So the more I was losing weight, and the better I was feeling, and the better I was looking, and the healthier I was becoming, the more their skin was playing up, the more they were having fights with their partners, the more bad luck they were having, the more weight they were putting on, the unhealthier they were eating, the more toxic their social circles became. And that's why I got yeeted. And in that October 2019, when I went through my dark night of the soul and I came up out the other side and started ascending to rise above everything that I was being put through with my ex and with my husband and all of that, I ended up this. And then I got locked up because what they were doing wasn't working. So they had to come up with something, because Chris needed to steal all my assets, steal my books, steal my products, my bakery idea with a Psycho Bakes Wakefield and all that. And I wasn't dying fast enough, so they had to hurry up the process. Then when I went online and did that video Rise Up, where I was calling Santaro out for being a fraud, it was like 2 days after that, that's when he put the cocaine in my pizza and called the cops. And I said to the boys before I got taken away, just remember how this happens, and I've got to stand my ground, I've got to stand in my truth. And my son said, just remember, you're doing it for the kids, Mum. And I never forgot that. And even the paramedics looked at my stuff and said, oh, you were drugged. They laced your drugs. You were the victim of a targeted attack. I'm paraphrasing, but the paramedics even said, you're a victim. But then, of course, when I went to the morons with the medical degrees and told them about my physics and what I do and what I'm planning to do, they couldn't understand it. It was way over their heads. So they decided that me being a Māori physicist with no education was worthy of being given anaphylactic and going into anaphylaxis twice a day. And now I've proven every single one of them wrong. With evidence, with scientific evidence, that their degrees weren't worth the paper they were written on, and they shouldn't even be practicing, because they've brought humiliation upon their credibility. You can't take a psychiatrist seriously anymore after I've exposed how little the mental health industry know about the supernatural and paranormal. It's embarrassing. They didn't even know who Carl Jung was. He's literally the father of occult psychiatry or occult psychoanalyzation. So I've come along and I'm explaining it all, and people don't like it because I'm exposing a fraudulent industry that people are making millions and billions from, charging hundreds of pounds, hundreds of dollars to have these readings that are based on cold readings and assumption and, And so I'm coming along and saying, but the thing is, what I'm trying to say to people is, you're doing it wrong. If you really want to have this connection, you need to do it right. And I'm trying to show you how to do it right. But people don't want to do the work on themselves, and people don't want to admit that they got it wrong. I had to admit I got it wrong. My blog started out Spirits and the Paranormal, trying to explain it all, and ended up doing myself out of my own successful podcasting and blogging, because as I was starting to study my students and investigate everything that I was witnessing, I started to realise that I had completely misunderstood what the paranormal was, and that I wasn't going to put my name to anything that was a lie. So I had to tear it all down and rebuild my understanding of what I thought the paranormal was, and as a result, I became an occult physicist. But people don't want to believe the truth, because then they have to admit they were wrong, and that's where the dangers of the delicacies of your pride and ego come in. And people would rather suffer the consequences of the psychological torment, trauma and damage that it does to your mind and your body than to admit they got it wrong. And when that happens, you're dealing with someone with a toxic, damaged ego. Which is why I said I don't want to teach adults any of this, because adults refuse to learn. They refuse to tear it all down and start again. They refuse to admit they got stuff wrong. And whereas children will happily go along, because children, it's like they can't get enough. When you tap into something that a child is into, they can't get enough of it. Which is why I said last night when I make my shows, the Paranormal Private Eyes, I'll pick kids that are into this sort of thing, who want to have a genuine understanding of what it is we're dealing with, because adults just refuse to be taught. And if I do take adults at the School of Alchemy, because I would prefer to be teaching children, take children on as students for the School of Alchemy, but if I do take on adults, I'm not really going to be the one that's teaching them, but I will for some things. But they will be signing legal waivers, and they will be having to come into it completely open to letting go of everything they thought they knew and trusting me to guide their ascension. Because then they're going to be given their little magic bags. Remember I said I'm going to have carpet bags like Mary Poppins when they graduate. And the little Mary Poppins bag, carpet bag, is going to be filled of, my clays and sprays and my BFGs and, all the things that they're going to need to take on their travels when they do their own investigations and stuff. And then they can just come to me for resupplies. They'll get discounts in that because they'll be members and blah, blah. Then they can go out into the world and help me fix everything that we've been getting wrong for so many years. Once people started realising they could make money off manipulating the occult, that's when it all went tits up. And before that, it was once the church got involved. Once they started forcing religion on people, that's when it really started going tits up. But when they started making money off it as well, is when it turned, all roads to hell start with good intentions. So the Victorians have got a lot to answer for, but I'm trying to correct it. But I had no support, because what I'm doing isn't popular and sexy and confusing to people who don't understand what I'm trying to tell them, because it's ingrained in them that the dead wander the earth and haunt the living. So, and my students didn't want to be a part of something that could possibly draw attention to their reputation. So they chose to support pedophiles instead. Takes a lot of guts to do what I do. Takes a lot of guts to be what I am. So, but I'm still here and I'm still breaking through that glass ceiling. People are finally starting to get it. Because, like I said, I've got people circling my orb now that are wanting to be a part of the empire that I'm building. And it has nothing to do with anyone on social media. So I've put a link to the video in the description box, and then he puts a link into the podcast that he did, so you can listen to it yourself. But now I've explained everything, listen to it, and then you'll see everything I was seeing, and you'll go, ah. But Yeah. I'd go to that house, I'd talk to that family, I'd tell them exactly what it was. I'd get the mum on her own and have a good chat with her so that I could get to the nitsy gritty, as Pearl in The Art of Creation would say, get into the nitsy gritty of the problem. And yeah, I'd be able to stop it, like boom, like that. And that's what we'll put on my shows. With the mystery inside history, if I get called to people's houses and businesses and establishments and that, it'll all be on camera, and you'll be able to see my process. So I'll do the adult version where it's dealing with serial killers and murderers and, all that sort of thing. But in that case, the one at Ramsgate, I would have sent the kids. That would be completely fine for the kids to deal with. It's the sort of show where I'd send my kiddies. So, yeah, get my team together, my film crew, and yep. So, get some researchers on board, and then yeah, I'll go in and wave my magic wand and do what I was put here to do, in spite of everyone trying to stop me. So yeah, I have been considering starting these tours off in the UK, like finding myself a local Yorkshire lad who's into this sort of thing, who would be prepared to drive and do these investigations, even if it was just for the foreseeable future in the Yorkshire, Lancashire, kind of, Nottingham, Derbyshire, local areas first. But then, of course, getting to America, and then obviously once I get justice and I get my sister and that over, we're going to do a tour of the UK to say goodbye, and I'll make more shows then, and then go over to America, and then that's when I'll land like a comet. I'm just waiting for God to get Trump out the way. So it's a slow process, but it is happening. So regardless of what he's trying to fool people into believing, he knows his days is numbered. He's just stubborn. So link in the description box, and then there in his description box, he's got the link to the podcast. But I'm disappointed in Kieran O'Keefe, because he was on Most Haunted, and I thought that he was smarter than that. I thought he was more switched on, but the fact that he was simping a little bit was embarrassing. And then that other doctor coming along, I'm embarrassed for them. I have zero education, and I'm better able to understand and explain this stuff more than the people whose parents would have spent tens of thousands of pounds giving them their degrees, which is why I'm going to have my own school, the Amber Wilkinson School of Alchemy, but we just call it the School of Alchemy. And I'll use it in my video game, Ghost Hunters Inc., and the hospital, and the cemeteries, and everything that's mentioned in my books, my children's stories. So I'm going to go and have the rest of my breakfast, and I shall speak to you later. Ka kite. Mwah.